we did have some conversation about that. I have also, based on that initial time where we did not approve it because there was really a very short paragraph that really didn't provide a great deal of background as to what was happening there. I was explaining to people that this is a type of project that we're kind of new on dealing with. I have taken the emails that I exchanged that I hopefully had copied everybody on from Peter Grant, and basically Peter explained and gave in the emails a reasonable explanation of the whys and wherefores in the project. Basically, he clarified that the $6,905 request was for the preparation of the permit and for design package for submission to the DEC, that the primary change in the request is the primary change from the initial document was that there's a clarification that harvesting is primarily due to remove algae mats, and it's not just floating vegetation. There is going to be some floating vegetation to be removed, and it may have some effect on the growth of HABs. But
so Greg, the algae mats that are being removed are a specific form of cyanobacteria. It's an HAB itself. So the mats being removed are one of the several HABs that we've documented that we have. And so,
Peter, can I just go through this? Sure. We have a limited amount. I have a limited amount of time today, and I don't want to.
My apologies,
because I'll be bolting out of here. I just if I have made any gross errors when I say okay, now we'll talk about it here, Toey and Julia, and then we'll ask. We'll take other comments. So that, and then he also explained that the timing of the effort is temporary pending the effectiveness of the hypolindenic withdrawal of Fosic is really taking effect. So this is for some period of time. It may be 2 years, it may be 5 years. Well, that will be determined pending the effectiveness. The removal techniques is a mechanical extraction, and the system is based on a conceptual plan designed by the town. Lombardo's involvement is limited to defining a system for drainage and drying and to prepare the permits package with the DEC. And that is really the time critical thing because they need to get that submitted into the DEC in order to make things happen. The risks associated with HABs in Fresh Pond were described in Appendix D of the July 25, 2022 tech report from Lombardo. The measurements of HAB in the pond were included, taken from the New York for Citizens statewide lake assessment program, CSLAP, and basically they found over the time period of 3 to 5 years, there has been identified quantities and potentially, levels of toxicity that were above the standard for what is considered safe waters. So that the WQI did not find a scientific basis supporting harvesting as an effective long-term procedure. However, subsequent communicating with Peter and on looking at some of the other information, we got a comment from a technical person that works for Lombardo Associates, Dr. Wagner, and he said, for a quick reduction, that mechanical harvesting is a good thing. It does not replace a hypolindenic. It's something that until the phosphorus removal process is completed and working, that's the benefit of having the mechanical harvesting.
So this is just the $6,000 or $7,000,
right?
Is just for the application and the permitting process.
That's correct. And I think a minor piece of drawing up of how they're going to dry and,
So what's the cost, and is WQI going to be asked to consider funding the cost of the actual mechanical harvesting?
that's a good point. The mechanical harvesting is being paid by the Fresh Pond Association, which they have apparently done for the past 3 years.
Okay.
To the tune of 22 grand. So that is their intention.
Okay, all right,
Their intention is to continue to do that.
okay.
Peter, just real quick, that is correct, right? You guys are.
There is a minor correction in what you just said, and thanks for throwing it to me. I'll be real brief. So the $22,500 that you're referring to has been each step of the way in the feasibility study, getting us to this point. The WQI contributed 19,500, I believe. The New York State DEC 30,000 to the process so far. It was not. We have not done short-term cleanup because we have not done the permitting yet, which is the TUI is right. It's the 6,900 is specifically for the permitting with the DEC, all the paperwork needed for that. And but yes, the Fresh Pond Neighbors Association has committed to all of the funding for the actual short-term cleanup work. That's all of the work with Solitude Lake Management. We're separate, obviously, from the work done with Lombardo Associates for the long-term, more significant cleanup, and that's what the $147,000 that you were clear about was for. But the $6,900 is just permitting for work that will thereafter not come back to the WQI, but will be funded by the 501c3 associated with Fresh Pond.
And just a guesstimate of the cost, Peter?
Yeah, so we had an initial contract contract proposal, it hasn't been signed, from Solitude for $6,000 per year. I don't suspect, first of all, that was last year, but second, the problem has continued to worsen a bit. So I'm not expecting that. I say that I think that's a base. I think realistically, certainly the organization's been anticipating 8,000. I'm hopeful it's under 10,000 each year.
A year. For how many years?
A year for the next maybe 3 or 4 years, maybe 5.
Okay.
Depending on how quickly the long-term process takes effect.
Yep.
Right. All right, and just so everyone knows that I have taken comments that some questions that I had asked Peter on this. He clarified the process, sent a couple of nasty photos of what Fresh Pond can look like. He copied me on the proposed Solitude process, which was a series of all the different processes that they do, and a series of locations where they have used mechanical harvesting and to remove. A lot of people, if I'm reading into Solitude correctly, a lot of people just harvest, and that's that's what they do. They just keep pulling stuff out. And then the statement from Dr. Wagner, where he indicated that that's about 7% of the pond is going to be harvested, and that again the bottom line is that it improves the situation. It's very unlikely to cause undesirable impacts, and again, as a short term, the long-term system is not in place. It's a reasonable thing. And there was a couple of other comments that Peter forwarded, and those sites are listed here, and they'll be in the record of this, our determination, basically describing DEC results, CSLAP results, archiving, what drove the Fresh Pond Association to move on this, I think. Any questions?
No, it's good.
No questions. Is there anybody else have any comments? Peter, are you covered now?
You did great. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I think what I would suggest is that what we could do is take the request section of what I forwarded to you today and just say the conclusion So the motion here would be the request portion, this first page. The WQI finds that the submitted permitting and design project meets the requirements as an aquatic habitat restoration project. We recommend the town board approve $6,905 request. So I'm not sure if the acting chair can make that motion, but I will. And one of you can second if you're okay with it.
Okay,
I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay with it.
All right, everybody in favor?
sure.
All right. So
Aye.
3,
And Betty.
and you get, yes, you, all right, so it's 4-0, 1 abstention, or whatever the hell he calls. Come on back.
Thank you.
James,
Great job.
James, come on
I
down.
say we should thank Greg for this is a really nice prep, because we
Really
all have access to the
incredible.
email, but the public didn't see it, so it's nice that you had it here where you could refer to.
It occurred to me only in the last 24 hours that, hey, wait a minute, that, you know, this is going to be very thin in the file that says what this approval was. All right, James has returned, and I yield the gavel.
I thank you. Thank you for your wonderful job. Now we will turn to the Cornell Cooperative Extension Program once more.
Okay. So yeah, just for, prosperity's sake.
And just just to put into the record, a couple of letters that we got, one from James Steiner, a teacher at Shelter Island School, and one from Dan Williams, another teacher at Shelter Island School, supporting the efforts of the CCE and how they interact with the children on Shelter Island and as an educational force, very positive. So I would put that into the record, please.
Yeah, they were very heartwarming letters. I was taken aback almost. So yeah, just to review things. There, okay. Just to review for the, reporting and everything, Kate Ross-Snook, I work for Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program, and my colleagues Barbara and I submitted an application, a proposal to do the Water Quality Improvement Committee for funding with water quality improvement funds, an expansion and continuation of the Back to Bay's shellfish and habitat restoration work we started last summer as our pilot year under a private foundation grant, which was granted to us to expand our network of stewardship sites. So the ask this year was, for this proposal, was for $200,000, and that would go towards planting 10,000 shoots, eelgrass shoots, 100,000 base scallop seed, 250,000 hard clam seed, and 10 million oyster larvae, or 160 cubic feet of spat on shell oyster reef. And all part of this proposal is, of course, the monitoring efforts that go in towards ensuring that specific sites for each of these restoration acts are appropriate and going to be successful. And that's it in a clamshell.
Nice twist on that.
Chris Picker will join me today. He's the director of the Marine Program, just to help kind of answer eelgrass questions, because as I've said, I'm the shellfish person, and while I generally understand eelgrass, he is the guy to really be able to speak authoritatively about it. So I don't know if you want to ask me any questions first, or if you want to just call him right up, or what.
I think Chris could speak. I mean, you've done a lot of great work on behalf of CCE, but there are still unanswered questions that apparently need to be addressed. So.
Chris, take it away.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Chris Pickrell. I'm the director of the Marine Program, Cornell Cooperative Extension of Suffolk County. I've been in the job for 30 years, my 30th year, and I'm the son of a Bayman boat builder, now oyster farmer. I've been living on and around the water my entire life, so I'm a local native, born in Huntington, but grew up in Southampton, so I'm a local guy. And my focus throughout my career has been habitat restoration, primarily using plant material. So that was starting with salt marshes, and then it moved on to seagrasses. So I began in, I think it was 93, with some of the first eelgrass work with the town of East Hampton. And since that time, I've done work throughout the country, the world for that matter. The paper that I distributed earlier was, it was a result of a meeting that I was invited to as a keynote speaker for success with eelgrass in Long Island Sound to present in Portugal of all places and talk about eelgrass restoration. So they were, impressed with what we had done here and then invited me, and that's kind of what came out of it. They had some more people from Asia and from Holland and places like that. So that's a paper that's pretty interesting to read. That focuses on kind of the scale of restoration. If you know anything about eelgrass and eelgrass restoration in particular, it's all about site selection. I've got on my computer a PDF of a project we did in collaboration with UConn, Dr. Jamie Baudry there, and we looked at a modeling coast for the entire Long Island Sound. That was in 2013, which was published then. And basically it comes down to finding sites where the eelgrass can survive. And as we all know, climate is changing. I'm not going to talk about the causes tonight, but climate is changing. And eelgrass is a colder water species. So as temperatures get higher, it's more difficult for it to persist. So we've had to find the spots that are cool, clear water. So we look at things like water clarity. So light reaching the bottom has to be at least 25% of solar radiation reaching the bottom. And we can measure that with light loggers, which we will do. We also put up temperature loggers, which is one of the easiest things to look at because you got to, what is the weakest link? So if it's too warm over what's 25 or 27 C, it's not going to survive. So Kate has already put out some loggers as of last year. So we're going to have some baseline data, which is great, moving into this so we can move forward. So basically what we look at is water temperature, light availability, sediment texture. So the amount of sand, the amount of percent organic matter. So basically, if it's above 10%, it can be toxic to the plants because of the amount of sulfur in there. And then in terms of water quality, we don't really measure water quality. We can, but point-in-time measurements aren't that useful. What we'll do is look at the species of macroalgae that are on the bottom that live there more or less year-round, and they're integrated conditions throughout the year as opposed to once in July, once in August, things like that. The temperature we do continuously, so we have that. So that's kind of how we look at these things. We started a pilot scale, and this is what we're doing here. So we want to kind of spread ourselves out. The other beauty of what we do is that the fact that we bring the community in, so school children as part of the stewardship effort. So we're educators at heart, that's what we really do. And these projects allow us to bring the community into work that we're doing. In the past, we entirely rely on divers and staff, and that's fun for us, but nobody can see what's going on. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. So with these efforts, we literally we collect either eelgrass seeds or eelgrass shoots. In the case of the shoots, we bring them into an environment where we have trays and we have the water, we have our tortillas where the children and adults can weave them into these things. It's almost like a weaving circle. And it's amazing how people can appreciate what the grass looks like, what it feels like, what it smells like. There's some snails on it, things like that, crabs. So it really engenders a sense of stewardship in people that otherwise wouldn't have any connection to it whatsoever because it's underwater. It's out of sight, out of mind. So that's part of the whole process. That it's a kind of a package deal in that way. So, yeah, I mean, I can go on and on if you want to, but if you had any specific questions about it, just know that we've got a lot of experience doing it. So this is what we do. It's very difficult though. Having said that, we have successes at certain locations. So we have a site in Long Island Sound, which is why I was invited to Portugal. That's 19 years old. There was no grass there, and we established grass there. We have a site in Sag Harbor that's going on 6 years old now. We have one in Greenport that's 5 years old. So we have these sites that we've built on, and they're successful. But a lot of the sites aren't successful because we have to select very, very carefully where we plant. And that's how we do test plantings, almost like a shotgun approach. Find out where initially is successful, then we can scale those up. Because the paper that I showed you talks about scale. There's advantage to scale, but you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket and spend tens of thousands on one site until you know that it's actually going to work. Places like Cockles Harbor, we've monitored that for the last 13 years or more. It's somewhat ephemeral. It kind of comes and goes. It's in the mooring field there to a certain extent. So you see the mooring change will kind of rip it out, but it'll reseed inside those areas. That site, we might try to use some seeds to expand that to add resiliency to that meadow in particular, because we're looking at possibly, if we get this funding, to do the oyster reef in kind of the back end near Ram Island. So it'll be all kind of together. The idea is to intensively do work in one small area if possible.
Does the eelgrass reseed itself? You did say yes. So does it expand if you put in this much? In 3 years, will it be
If it's happy, yes, it can. So, yes, so basically, it can spread vegetatively or sexually. So sexually through the seeds, just like plants you have in your garden.
Right.
It'll drop seeds, and they only go so far, unless it's very calm. If the day the seeds get released is very calm, they'll float to the surface on a water bubble and travel the entire length of the harbor. But that's pretty rare. But typically the spread is through vegetative means, so it's clonal. So it'll kind of spread, almost kind of like chicken feet, but kind of do this that way. And each shoot can last no more than 2 years. So if you lose it 2 years in a row, you lose the whole population. That's why it's important to get these things established. And Cockles has hung on, which is good.
Chris, if you had to graph, freehand in the air.
Yeah.
The field that you've done in Long Island Sound, Sag Harbor, and Greenport, what would those graphs look like? Sort of like you planted it and it's kind of steady state, you planted it and, it's kind of, what would they look like?
In terms of development over time? So we typically would go out and do a shotgun approach. So we do multiple, very small scale plantings the first year, and then we come back the second year, and if they survive, then we build on that. So basically it builds slowly and then it ramps up. Yeah, so it does. So in the case, eelgrass, I didn't talk about this, about the ecology, but they're what are called ecosystem engineers. So they alter the environment by trapping sediments, by changing current patterns, and that's why clams will set in the grass meadows, things like that. So when we planted in the Sound, it was kind of unheard of. Nobody had done it before because it was in a rocky, cobbly area. But once we put the grass in, it took about, well, it was actually 2 years, but by the third year, it was all sand because it acted as a snow fence, basically, about the sand. And then over time, we'd see these dunes form, and then they would erode away. There'd be pockets in them, so you have this heterogeneity, which is great in nature. You want to see a difference. You don't want to see a monoculture, basically. So you really need to see that happen. And it displaced the macroalgae. There's plenty of macroalgae in the Sound, so it wasn't a problem. Yeah.
And it's still alive, the one in the Sound?
Oh, yeah.
I thought, read somewhere, there was nothing left in Long Island Sound, but
No.
that's hyperbole.
Yeah. So we have a site that's been there for, like I said, years. I think it was 2004, I believe, first year, something like that. And then we've got sites on either side of Great Gull Island. And then we've got some at what's called 67 Steps in Southwold.
Yeah.
We have planted as far west as the mouth of Huntington Harbor and what's Homestead State Park. And the issue there is the tidal amplitude. So you want to plant this as shallow as you can without it being exposed in the winter when you get the strong northwest winds that clean out the Sound. And also the waves rip out the bottom. So the tidal amplitude up there is like 6 or 7 feet. So we have to plant it so deep that when the tide was up, there wouldn't be enough light for it to grow. So that was the balance there. Because there was a paper put out by Eva Marie Koch from Maryland, and she predicted that would be about the location based on the modeling. And she was right, but we just couldn't get it. We had a zone of literally a vertical meter where we can plant into, but we just couldn't keep it going. We haven't been back in years. There still could be something there, but I seriously doubt it. Yeah, so, but we've gotten funding from a bunch of National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Long Island Sound Study for work in the Sound, and we've stopped because it's growing, it's there, it's fine. We just did sign a contract with New York State Department of State as part of the South Shore Estuary Reserve for $1.3 million to do a plan for the entire South Shore of Long Island. So we're putting out light loggers, temperature loggers at 100 sites around the South Shore. And there we're looking for groundwater inputs to cool the meristems of the plants. We're looking at light. We'll be doing the test plantings and doing the same approach where we start small and then scale up.
I think I asked Katie this question, but you might have answered for Chris. So the testing, you did some in Silver Beach, right?
I put
Okay.
temperature logger in Crab Creek.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So that's the first threshold. So if the temperature stays below 25, that's a pass, but then we have to go the light next. And if that's a pass, then we can move on from there. The light loggers, like temperature loggers, we can put them out year round because there's no issue with fouling. But the light loggers, we have to put them out and check them every 2 weeks to clean them off because they get fouled with algae inside. So we do that kind of just during maybe July when it's the lowest light conditions.
So do you do it any other time of year for the light testing or just?
No. Sometimes, it's like June and through August, but the most critical time is in the midsummer, basically, when there's a lot of algae in the water.
So that's the lowest light.
Yeah, so there has to
Most light, but the most algae.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, we want to see 25% or more of light that's reaching the surface of the water, reaching the bottom. So.
Just a couple comments, probably. I think that we're all in agreement on the WQI that this is an aquatic habitat restoration project, and that there are two of the elements of the project, is spat-on shell oyster reef and eelgrass planting, and that's restoration of habitat. And in terms of whether or not it is well documented, I just took a quick look at, I Googled it. And these are all eelgrass planting projects that have happened over the past 3 or 4 years. And then this was oyster reef in Peconic Bay. So the searches for these two elements are out there. And so to my mind, well documented, I'd say yes. Then there's the distribution of the oysters, hard clams, and scallops. And I understood generally that you're going to try and focus many of them in the areas where you're putting the eelgrass and things like that.
Yeah, because so many studies have found that there's greater success when it's all concentrated. Just like what Chris said, clams have a tendency to want to be where eelgrass is.
It's nice to think that they have that sort of. I suppose that there's a chance, again, that the initial thing in my mind was, well, wait a minute, we have this horrible die-off that seems to happen every summer. However, for the first third or half of the summer, you're getting benefits of cleaner water by those scallops.
Talking about scallop, yeah. So I can talk about scallops if you want to.
Sure. Let me go through this because I unfortunately have a time constraint. The project management and education outreach components are also in this funding, and they are certainly at the complexity of this project. It sounds like management is a really good thing. And then the education component falls into what we have in our recent Appendix F, social. The fact that these teachers have said, hey, please continue this. The kids love it. The kids we're getting STEM kids out of it. So that all fits into our habitat and then the social benefit. There is somewhat, and this would be just for future, next year, you'll probably be back. There isn't a direct tie-in between this is how much it costs to do the oyster reef, and this is not how much at least I couldn't find it. This is how much the eelgrass is. This is, it would be beneficial, I think. It would allow people to understand what the options might be. And we may wind up requiring options because we may have.
Like are you trying to say in case we have to take a section off?
Yes, and also.
We're hesitant to give assigned numbers to each task because, like I said, it's beneficial to do them all. So it'd be more like if there was hesitation about the full ask, we would scale back the project.
In its entirety, not in parts.
Yeah, exactly.
But didn't you give sort of or was it just an amount of clams? Or?
I think it was like the ag team, the habitat team, the management and education, supply equipment, and travel and indirect costs.
Okay.
So that was the 6 buckets.
It was all together.
Yeah, and God's honest truth, that first document we had, my head was spinning. It just didn't work. Again, that's a future issue. I don't feel it's,
But she just answered, actually. She said if we need to reduce,
scale it back
it's going
in
to all
total.
come back.
Yeah.
Right.
But what Greg is saying is if you track your costs this year, so we had this many man hours on eelgrass. He's saying if you're coming back again, he wants to see those numbers. I think that's what
I would prefer that. I'd like to understand that.
Well, and also it would be different because, like Kim had explained, once things are started and established and all that monitoring, that's the heavy hitter, is all the monitoring that takes so much time. Once that's all established, then it's like a much smaller cost for just maintaining.
Right. Yes, that is to my memory as well. So I just wanted to get those convert those pieces into the record.
So specific to eelgrass, we heard at the work session, one of the Baymen brought up, the fact that the eelgrass in Cockles Harbor seems to be spreading. There's some over by the monastery, or, not the monastery anymore, but it was the monastery.
Sailor's Island.
Right, and Sailor's Island, and he was questioning whether the effort should be put to another body of water.
We're open to any of that, for sure, but that meadow in particular is somewhat ephemeral, so it moves around. So we want to make sure we have enough of a base so that if there is a very hot year, that it can withstand some of that temperature variation.
Right.
But we're more than willing to look at other locations as well, and that's why we have temperature loggers out already at other sites. But I don't know that they're going to be cool enough, so that's the thing, we just don't know until we do the monitoring. So we're going to have to adaptively manage this project. We'd even come back to you guys and say, hey, we found this, should we move forward with that type of thing? So, because we're going to, the tortillas and buds, or which?
It was kind of, I think it was gonna be like what we found out,
Okay.
that was what we were going to.
So there's two planting seasons. So they set seed sometime in July. We collect the flowering shoots then to put in these buoys that will sprinkle the seeds on the bottom. That's July. The tortillas, the adult transplant, is in the fall, even almost into the winter if you want to. But you basically want to do it soon after August. August is the most stressful period. You want to do it after that, so it has a full almost a year before it gets exposed to those very high temperatures, relatively high temperatures and low light.
How long does the high temperature have to be above?
Thank you, Greg.
Take care, Greg. Thank you very much.
Well, I was gonna say, except when you have 60-degree weather in February.
No, I'm just saying, how much time does it take to screw things up if the temperature's above 25 degrees?
So 25, it can be for a period of time. It's 27 is a real threshold, but if it's below 25, it's wonderful. But 27, it's for maybe a week or two.
Just monitoring in Fresh Pond, I see that, that 1.5 meters down,
Yeah.
that temperature.
Rarely gets, if it hits 27, it's very rare.
Yeah.
And
We're
I don't
looking
know
at bottom
how that
temperature.
relates to the bay.
Yeah. So we're looking at bottom temperatures.
Right.
Obviously. So what we've found is that the surface can be as hot as a bathtub, but it's what's happening at the bottom.
Right.
Because if you know about the anatomy of the plant, the meristem, the growing point is at the very base, and it's kind of buried in the sediment. So as long as that sediment stays chilled somewhat, it can be 80 degrees,
Okay.
27, Celsius above. And we've seen that in Bullhead Bay and Pecans. So where we have that, where we've seen that meadow come and go, but the fact that we have groundwater moving in from the adjacent areas has allowed that to withstand basically climate change. So it's hose water is 55 degrees Fahrenheit, very cold.
Right.
That's what's coming out of the bottom. So we're hoping to find some of those areas in your water bodies as well. We'll pick up on them with these temperature loggers.
There's a similar case with Napeague, right? That's why one of,
Yeah.
small swath of eelgrass was surviving there because Steve found,
So it's very, very, very site specific, very small, so we have to be able to monitor that. You can't do that at a large scale. You can kind of put together a model, but then you have to go and intensively look at those temperatures, at the
Right.
bottom.
Right. So most of the time it's more than 1.5 meters.
Down that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, well, it depends on the sites.
so Steve specifically, when he handed off those extra loggers to me, he specifically said, try to put them in an area that is above 3 feet, like deeper than 3 feet.
Okay.
Because with the tide, you want to make sure it's deep enough.
Yeah. It was a depth just awkward enough for me to try to get down there.
A question, so in all the other sites that you've worked on, when you're talking about the shotgun approach, because you have to test out, you don't know, probably some of them are gonna fail. What is your margin of waste, I guess you'd say?
Actually, for adult plants, it's quite a bit, because you have to, so our work in the sound, which I'll use, is we have quite a depth range. So we'll do plots in the very shallow water, then out to very deep water. And we want the shallow and deep to die because we want to know what that range is. So here, there's not quite as much tidal amplitude, and we don't have that much to worry about, but we're going to be doing different sites, and some of them will not make it. That's just the nature of this work. So the ones that do, then we can add to the following season.
But do you have like a number, roughly? I'm just curious.
For test plantings, we'll be lucky for 25% successful test plantings, literally. But that's the nature, that's why you do it. That's why you put a little effort at many sites. And then once you come back in and you found a site that works very well, then you intensively plant that. Whereas if you intensively plant a site that was one of the 75% that didn't make it the first time,
Right.
then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So what your sample site is how large? Just
Usually we have at least 100 shoots. We have 10 of 10. So we do that, and then we do groups of 5 of those. So sometimes about 500. So I'm not sure what the total number is there, but we'll do clusters of them with depth. Right. That way. And then again, we're looking to see some of them die on either end of that tidal range. And then we'll come back and check on the ones that do survive.
I have a couple of questions. So
Yeah.
do you want all of Cockles Harbor to be covered in eelgrass? Would that be ideal? I'm just wondering, questioning.
Personally, yes, but I don't know if everybody else does. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't, it would be a healthy, for the
It's habitat, water quality, all the above, so waterfowl, shellfish.
I would add
birds.
to that and say, and Chris kind of touched on it, is that it's important to have varied bottom structure. So correct me if I'm wrong, but like you don't want it just to be all one thing,
right?
You need to be able to support different little clusters and micro habitats within the larger scale.
Let's fast forward a few years and let's say you bring scallops back into Cockles Harbor just from this combined effort.
Yeah.
But then the guys are gonna go and wanna harvest them and they do that in a gross way.
Well,
They're their own worst enemy.
Trenches, right?
So dredging done properly should not be ripping out the grass because you're digging. They don't want to dig, they want to skim across the surface. Not to say that they don't take out some of the shoots, but if they're digging up grass, they're not doing it right because they're picking up mud. They don't want to pick up mud, they want to pick up scallops.
Scallops, wow.
So actually, when I did some kind of informal observations in Orient Harbor, when there was still grass there, they were dredging there. And you look from the surface and it's like, oh my God, the grass is gone. But when you dove down, it was the macroalgae that was attached to the eelgrass, not the eelgrass. The eelgrass was still there. So it was like effectively sweeping all the crap out and then just leaving the grass behind.
So in a way, it's
In that case, you could say that. I don't want to just publicly say that was, I just say it's not all bad. It's not all bad. But
you are saying it publicly.
yeah.
So what will the restrictions be in terms of use of the area that you wanna mess around?
Well, we don't want to do it. No, so that's so.
Well, that's what I've said, kind of like when I've done my little scallops, just like, let's not just, they were also smaller, so there's no way they would be harvest size. Like, right, I planted them in the summertime, they weren't going to be harvest size by the fall. So I did that on purpose, and then I still marked the corners, just be like, just don't bury them or don't, like everywhere else, but it was just that small plot. But once they're big enough, by all means, they only live for 1.5 to 2 years, so go get them.
So we pride ourselves in trying to work with the baymen so that we can support them and support the natural environment. We don't want to put them out of business, so we want to work together and get their buy-in. They know more about the waters than we do. We've studied in books and I've spent a lot of time in the water, but they're on the water every day, so we have to respect their knowledge. So we want to work with them to site these sanctuaries, if they're going to be sanctuaries in a place that they don't dig. It's just how we operate, which I think is a little different than some other folks.
Regarding scallops, I've heard that they want to try and seed them in the fall, which is different than what.
There was an article today that came out in the North Forker or something. Talking about the work that my colleague Harrison Toby is doing, is trying to, as well as Josh Perry, who's in the other hatchery, trying to spawn them at a different time and then kind of get them a little bit acclimated to different temperatures.
So there's a couple different things going on. So there's a selective breeding program to breed in tolerance to higher temperatures, because temperatures are affecting everything. But what you're talking about is the fact that we're looking to spawn them in the fall rather than summer, so they're alive for a shorter period of time before they can be harvested. So there'd be a lower parasite load in them, because the parasites build up in the livers and in the tissue, body tissue. So that's the trick there. Now, a certain percentage already will spawn in the fall, but not a lot of them. We want to encourage that fall spawn for that reason. That's what's going on.
And there's nothing that can be done about the parasites.
No, not at this point. It's interesting because the population will sustain itself almost in perpetuity, just we can't get to it because they die before they're harvested. So they survive and they spawn, so they generate progeny. So that's everybody's purpose, is to generate progeny. They do that, but they just don't live long enough for us to harvest them. So it's not, so they're always there every year in pretty high numbers, but they die too soon. So we got to get them so that they're resistant to the parasite stress.
Does the temperature have an effect to nurture the parasite?
Yes, it was the parasite also has always been, it's not a new invasive thing. It's just all the stresses of the lower dissolved oxygen and the higher temperatures, especially after spawning, they're in a slightly weakened state. And so that just makes them more susceptible to the parasite. It's like when you're like tired and overworked and then you get sick.
Get sick.
Yeah.
All those things together.
Yeah.
I'll just say, just to put it out there, interesting talking about shellfish. We have a yearly Valentine's Day oyster spawn, and we had one this week. We produced 220 million oysters so far. So that's, not all of them are going to survive, but they're going through all of our hatcheries. So the volunteer hatchery, the big hatchery. So those are the kind of numbers we can produce. Then we can run about, I think it's 90 million through our spout on shell tanks.
A couple of the old bay men have asked me if they're dying by early October, why can't I get them?
There's been talk about, maybe it's the harvest season should be shifted, but.
What do you guys think of that?
I don't object to it out of hand, so I'm not sure. As long as they're spawning, like they have to spawn.
Right,
So,
that's the important.
but the thing is, so if we're looking at for a fall spawn, then you're going to harvest them before that happens. So
Yeah.
kind of getting away with that.
Right.
Now, Mother Nature's already kind of selectively breeding these guys. So there's a certain percentage will survive even through the heat. And some of those are living to interbreed. So we had seen really low survival initially, and then it came up a little bit, and then it's down again. So it's going to happen on some, but we want to speed up that process. So we're working with folks at Stony Brook. They're exposing them to those conditions in the hatchery or in their lab. We bring them to our hatchery. We've got them in Southhold now. We've got, I think, 5 different groups. You're working on it.
Yeah, I'm doing it. It's an ambient group, 3 separate, replications, and then 3 degrees warmer. It was really interesting. Bassam explained it to me that that average 3 degree difference looks at what we're experiencing here, like if we were the ambient, if we were the raised temperature versus Cape Cod, whose scallop season has been doing just fine, and Nantucket, that would be the ambient, we would be the heated. It's like a 3 degree difference on average. Also,
3 is huge.
and 3 is huge. Yeah.
Between here and there.
When you're talking about water temperatures, 1 degree is huge. I did, when I was an undergrad, I was looking at the power plant on Mount Hope Bay, switched from closed cooling to open cooling, which usually they switch the other way. And it happened to coincide with a major winter flounder die-off. Like they're not die-off, but like they couldn't be fished anymore. And I actually looked at the sediment cores and looked at the distribution of diatoms and could see a distinct shift in the diatoms that were in the water. It correlated with the temperature, and it would raise the temperature of the bay, that area of the bay, by 1 degree.
Well, we're
With the
already
full
up,
shift.
like over the last 50 years, is it 9 degrees? No.
It's not that much. That was the other thing. It was that average 3 degrees was another magic number from now versus, I can't remember how many years ago, but it was like back when it was good.
Yeah. It's already 3 degrees.
Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Well,
But you're already collaborating in some respects with Stony Brook.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So with the animal disease lab, so Dr. Bassam Alam is the gentleman that runs that facility. His wife is also involved. So we've got a lot of collaboration with them already, which is really good. So we've got the heavy duty science on that side of things, and we've got the boots on the ground, connections in the field. We've got the hatcheries that they don't have. So they've got flex pond, but it doesn't really, you can't produce much.
It's not
Fuel fed
operational.
shellfish, not
Yeah,
operational.
it's
We've
not
got a
operational, yeah.
huge hatchery in Southfield, plus a small hatchery that's been around since '92.
I'm in the smaller hatchery. That's the one where we produce all the shellfish for the town seeding program. And then, I'm running this experiment just because I made the argument too. 'Cause it's
Comment
cool.
on the town seeding program, people have said that, just putting these bunch of scallops and clams in
doesn't seem to work.
Well, honestly.
You know, that's, I don't have any scientific
volume.
basis to say that, I just hear that.
So to compare with my time as hatchery manager in East Hampton, those volumes were so much larger. You know, in East Hampton waters, we were producing millions of shellfish that were going into 5 different harbors, I think, ish. Millions every year. And so the amount of shellfish we're seeding is like thousands here. So it's, you need more.
And Suffolk County funds us has been every year to do the Scallop project, the restoration project. So if you go on the North Fork, obviously, and you go past Orient Harbor, the yellow buoys, you're looking at a blue light, that's a spawner sanctuary for bay scallops. We have 1 million or more scallops in there at any one time. And they're what's helping to reseed the entire system. So we've been able to prove that through scientific paper.
Wasn't there a big die-off there too, though? A couple years ago?
Well, throughout, but not as much in our lantern nets off the bottom. But yeah, I mean, it affects all of them, but they do better in the nets for sure. Yeah, we still have them, basically. So we planted out a number this fall.
Okay, so here's the tough question.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense that if, okay, I'm gonna, again, live in the future just for a minute. If PEP's, they're undertaking a siting program over the next 2 years, 300,000. I think it's siting for eelgrass restoration. If at that point, let's look forward 2 years, that they say, well, these are the ideal places. Do you work together then? Like, do you know what I'm saying?
Ideally.
Like,
Yeah.
are they there,
Yeah.
or I don't even know how.
Well, we have been their experts for a number of years.
Yeah.
Steve, who works for me, was at the TAC today. We're always at the TAC. And I was at another committee meeting for whatever reason. But yeah, I'm always at meetings. So yes, so large scale modeling makes sense. Like I showed you the 265. They're doing something similar, but I guess an aerial version of that, looking at temperature in some way. I can't get the details. I'm not telling you what
They
it is.
haven't showed us the
I'm trying, yeah, I asked for
project yet.
I can, but anyway, what we're doing can only complement that, because when you do a large scale model, that's great, but then you have to intensively look at temperature on the bottom.
You have to ground truth it.
So that's ground truth. So that's what we did in Connecticut. We had the entire estuary. We had kind of sentinel sites where we did the intensive things that we're talking about right now. Because there's only so much you can do with a plane. It's very, very good in terms of covering large areas, but you have to get in the water, get on the bottom to measure that temperature. And look at the sediment texture, which you can't do from a plane or even a boat. You have to have divers down there. So this can only augment and add to what they're doing. What we're doing is it's a team effort.
So you might get there at the same point. That's what
So I would expect that if we have success, or when we have success in some of these areas, that they're gonna pick up, it should be predictive in their model. If it doesn't, then there's a problem with somebody's.
If you're successful in their models, then-
Yeah, it should be, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
or if you're not successful in your models,
And then we
That's
can
it should be,
refer to
yeah.
their model and be like,
or it should have been,
No, that could be really.
you know, or they can say, I told you so.
So don't plant it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I guess the real you know, there's seemingly, you know, I'll just speak for myself candidly, you know, there was seemingly a very good meeting of the minds at that work session, you know, and
Everybody seemed to come out of that work session like, this is great. And then, like, you know, there was some dialogue with PEP, and they were, you know, sort of like trying to pop the balloon. Like, I hate to talk about balloons being popped.
I try not to watch the news, so.
You know,
Yeah,
I mean that, for me, I was pretty comfortable until then, you know, hearing, and I think it was Kate's comment about who gets to judge who, and you know, I don't know, that's anybody's prerogative, and I don't know who died and put them in charge, but you know, and I'd be happy to talk with anybody about it, but you know, from what I've heard from you guys, you know, from now Chris and, you know, Kim for him, and it seems like a viable thing to try and do. I mean, you know, where you kind of try and do something, you can't just say, well, it's probably not going to work, and they're not saying it's not going to work. And, you know, to me, it seems like this is a lot different than just putting seeds in it. You're nurturing them, you're monitoring them, you're seeing how they're doing and why they wouldn't be doing well if they're not.
Right, and it's adding
You
to
know,
our
and
collective
to me, it
database
seems
as well.
like
It's been done before.
And it's
It's not a pilot project.
Right. So, and also the fact that we're kind of holistically dealing with it and working with the community. So it's educational opportunities, stewardship
Right.
opportunities as well. So we're not just doing this as pinheaded scientists, which I tend to want to be. We're engaging with local citizens and the men and women who know more about the world than we do and acknowledge that. So it's a team effort. That's why it's these stewardship sites make sense, because we do everything we can think of in one location, so it has the maximum benefit. It's not just something there and something there. We try to do it together.
But you're confident that at some point there's going to be reaching across the aisle here with PEP and
On our end, there's no, yeah, right, yeah.
You know, I guess,
no, just that at some point, well,
These programs in some
they're
towns.
doing like similar
Yeah.
endeavors, not exactly, but I just hope that at some point they're, you know, you
you
well, you
don't
both work
want, what we
together
don't want
anyway.
is duplication and waste
Yeah.
of resources.
Right.
I've been doing this for 30 years, so
Yeah.
it's not like a new name in town doing this kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
been doing Hillcrest for that time. Did the work in the sound, just signed a contract with Department of State and South Shore Estuarine Reserve to do the entire South Shore. So, I mean, that's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're not the ones we're not putting up roadblocks, like.
And we're not
we
questioning
have-
anybody else's work.
We
don't
have
wanna question anybody
I
else's.
watched the
history of working with them, so
Yeah.
we're still open to keep working with them, so.
Yeah, and I'm not here to judge anybody else. That's not.
Yeah.
That's not what we do.
You know, personally, just putting it out there for discussion purposes, I would be inclined to approve up to $200,000. And then if somebody else who actually has the final say has some issue with it, they could reduce that at their discretion.
I'm in
That would be
favor of
the
your.
Yes.
That was a motion, I'll second.
I can't make the motion, but,
No,
you know,
can I
like
make a
my,
motion?
you can make a motion to, you know, but, you know, I don't,
Can you see Betty? I just want to see if Betty wants to chime in too, because she's.
No, I think this is a worthwhile project for a number of reasons, and I'm willing to give it a go. So that's my own.
And I think we've had ample discussion.
yeah, you guys have been very forthcoming.
I was ready to vote like 2 sessions ago.
And to known quantity, it's not like somebody came with a bright idea and well, let's try an experiment.
You've
Right,
been doing it.
You
Yeah.
are the resource.
You know, and I feel I'm happy that it's gonna happen on Shelter Island, you know,
Yeah.
it's.
I mean, it could happen to Cockles Harbor.
Silver Beach.
So if you would like
We
to
got you.
craft a motion,
I would like to craft a motion that we proceed and recommend to the town board that they approve it.
For
for
200,000.
Up to 200,000.
I'll second.
any more discussion about this? I know that in my discussion with Greg this morning, he was sort of in favor of this as well, even though he's not here and I'm speaking on his behalf, but I think I'm speaking, you know, as he would want me to.
Yeah, I would just say from the WAC point of view, this is the very definition of seed money.
Yeah.
Oh,
but,
Where's the gum? All right, so if there's no further discussion, I would ask for a vote. All in
Yep.
favor?
Yes.
Aye. Betty?
Betty Ram.
Hi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So,
Thanks for your
yeah, so then
perseverance.
the next move is
We'll
tomorrow,
be setting the public hearing.
right, tomorrow. Tomorrow?
No.
meeting? No, we don't need a meeting tomorrow?
No.
Okay, that's what I've written down, okay, no,
Yeah, I can't.
We set the
remember.
public hearing on the 28th, right?
Yeah, yes,
great.
yes. So then it'll be, but it may be a different timing, so it doesn't have to wait till the end of March.
Okay,
But I'm a little fuzzy on it. But
We know that time as
Yes.
is a player here.
yes.
We'll do our best to get it.
awesome, fantastic. So, and I'm also off the hook for a meeting tomorrow, then.
Yes.
It's better.
Got a hot take?
Thank you so much, guys, thank you for your openness to.
Thank you, guys.
everything.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We
had to wait and set
On to the project plan that we were supposed to, I guess, have been appraised of. Who's leaving?
Doing. Back to
Argentina, doing?
Wait, we're not. I'll be right back. It's like, where's he going? I thought the same thing.
Get paid now. No.
Sorry.
Maybe the 27th.
Yeah, we may do it Wednesday.
Whatever, I mean, I think,
Special meeting,
yeah.
just for this.
Just to get us to. What's your surprise?
And I have to go back and look at the.
BJ, how long do you anticipate this next section going?
It's not long because we're just delving into
Section
it.
next.
This is
for you.
an introduction to it.
Yes.
Before 7:30?
Yes.
Okay.
No, Greg is, I miss Greg when he's not here. I mean, I really do. He helps clarify my own thoughts. To be honest with you. But,
He's also a good wordsmith.
yeah, he's a good wordsmith. He really is. He's clarifying to still. So this is, let me just give you 2 minutes of background.
Do we, Patty, shake your head if you can hear clearly.
Can you hear me when I'm
just-
talking? Or should I move up?
Or should you go to the podium probably?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just.
We need, hold on. And this, and my, in case you all have anything. So the CPF is required to do a project plan, is what it's called. And it's basically, what are we gonna spend the money on? You have to do it every 5 years. Our last one expired in 2019, not good. We're not supposed to actually even buy property unless we have a project plan. So that's how this got started. But since the last plan, which was done in 2014, WQI happened.
Right.
So it changes what needs to go into the project plan. WQI needs to go into the project plan. Now, Gordon has brought up many times now that Fred Thiel has said, quoting, that the WQI should not turn into a slush fund. Now, there's no explanation, and it was later, he can't find it in writing anywhere. He saw it once, we can't find, like, it was deleted. But I think I know what that means. It's like, just don't sit on a pile of money over here. You could be putting it to work someplace, either back in CPF or, don't just, so I think that we're, first of all.
It's at the discretion of the town board.
Yeah.
Whether it gets carried forth. And it says that, if there was a particular project for CPF that required funds that, that it wasn't in existence.
Take them back.
Then you might take them back for a bona fide reason.
Right.
But isn't there also something that says that it shouldn't be held without a specific intended purpose?
Okay.
Like the big septic
I couldn't
project.
find specific.
Well, I have to just qualify something, from the outset, this board has been more of a project vetter.
Yes.
And
Yes.
banker.
Yes.
That's, my understanding of our function has always been that. Can we kind of like push people, say, hey, there's some funding here if you have a project, if you need to do, something with wastewater or whatever, we can sort of like maybe nudge people a bit, but we're not the people who come up with the projects and figure out what the project is and then, apply to ourselves.
Right.
No, but I
So
would,
it's sort of hard to have a plan of things because we would have to know, or somebody would have to have already thought of them.
yeah. Well,
We can kind of earmark where we would love to see the money go.
That's what you were
well,
saying.
yeah, and what I'm also saying is CPF just puts every property on Shelter Island in the potential list. That's because if it's not in the list, you'd almost have to go back and amend the project plan if you found a piece of property that you didn't think of originally. So we just put everything in the list. I mean, it's not, nobody, it seems to be what every town does. You just put all the properties there and you say,
Well-
it's these 15 that we really are, would be
Yeah.
crown jewels in the crown. But really, there's all the rest of these, anything over 3 acres that's potentially subdividable, that's important. So I'm just, and then all vacant land is potentially important, because if it abuts something we already have, even if it's a half an acre, maybe that's worthy. And price will matter, so if it's a piece of property you really weren't considering, but the price is really good, and you could see where eventually you would consider it then. So that's why everything is thrown in there.
Yes.
Now, so Appendix F here was my feeble attempt to just do that same thing, go all the way to the last page in that handout. The rest of that is just all the verbiage. I want this plan to have all the law in it, so you don't have to go searching around.
Right, now, thank you.
So last.
Highlighting is very helpful.
Last page is all of this. This is what I think I'd like you to have a look at, not necessarily tonight, over the next couple of weeks before you meet again. And I would add number 7, pump out boat. Now, it's not necessarily that you're going to do all this.
Right.
It's just that these are things that would fulfill the intent of the law, really, and the intent of the money, in my mind. Now, if I've forgotten something, then, throw it in there. I would also say that if you're finding, so apropos of how you started this discussion, if this WQI is finding that you're not doing enough IA systems, that you could do more, that in other words, it's slow, the application process, and we've had a pandemic, and we've had shortages, we've had inflation. I mean, there's a bunch of reasons why we've not put in a lot of systems in the last few years, but let's get.
And bad PR.
Yeah, the goal too, right, plus the tax thing, that was a nightmare.
And there's been a lot of
And the
reasons.
difficulty of dealing with Suffolk County and.
Oh my gosh, and they have to come, and then we had a crash,
Well,
a computer crash.
Yeah,
at
but
Suffolk County level.
that's recent.
I know, but I mean, it was just a topper off
Yeah,
to a
yeah,
bad
yeah,
3-year stint. So all I'm saying is, if you have a goal, and I'm just gonna throw these numbers and dates out, if by June it still hasn't come up to a healthy rate, which I would say is 40 to 50 a year, then tell the town board, look, this isn't, so how about the town board, you authorize an outreach, not done by you necessarily, but done by the town, maybe done by Coco.
We've talked about that.
But it's up to you to tell us that it's not fast enough and that we need to do
It's sort of like
something.
we were talking about, like, if you could say, okay, this triangle, we want to try to get the 50, like 50 a year in this triangle. And to do that, perhaps, we would help underwrite, like the concierge service to do it, so the Joe Blow, the homeowner, doesn't have to do anything,
Doesn't have to do anything.
except allow the backhoe on its property.
Right,
And
and they get a free septic,
they get it's free septic.
yes.
I think looking at specific areas is gonna be more beneficial than just say, we make a new pamphlet for the Green Expo.
Yeah.
That's.
No, I know.
No, I think we have to
On the areas
target.
that we know are problematic. I mean,
And I can tell you that this has come up at the Silver Beach Association meetings.
Yeah.
People in my area are interested in this, and we've actually brought this idea up about
Right.
having a concerted effort in Silver Beach, so.
Now, with Silver Beach, your problem is not IA, solvable.
No,
It's still salt. And so you might be better off, going right to SWA, Suffolk County Water. But I.
But also, if we were talking about just a minute ago, Silver Beach is very important for the health of the harbor
Oh.
and any of the tidal wetlands that it touches. So, and that was the intent of the Suffolk County grant in the first place, was to protect the tidal wetlands, and they weren't thinking about Shelter Island as a completely separate entity with its own water system that needs to be protected.
It was to reduce the nitrates.
Right, going into the bay.
Septics into the bays, right.
So,
So again, this is it, please look at this. I highlighted, what I highlighted, I thought was, I don't know why, I was willy-nilly.
And so these are the points that
Yeah.
could potentially go in this formalized plan.
Right, exactly. And so if you do this in the next 2 weeks to a month, we come back, we have the final
Before next
discussion. Yeah, where we.
I think we can talk about it in the next meeting, but, there's plenty of
Right, and then,
You have a deadline that you.
I would like it done within a month, because then I do need to take it to CPF, and this, so this is Appendix F of a lot of, there's a lot of, it's gonna be 50 pages.
Well, then, I mean, I think, as we are saying, one of the things we need to talk about is how to get more people to do it,
Yeah,
right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, even at my house, okay, next to Cockles Harbor, I mean, I'm not on the water, but I'm next to it.
you're in the near shore overlay,
And, I would do it. I have a relatively new system.
yeah.
But it's like, I've chased the state around for 40 years of my life, and I don't want to do it anymore.
Well, you don't.
And like, somebody figure out how to do
It's a
it.
pain.
I don't know.
People have gone through it.
I don't know, I found it seamless. My installer handled a lot of it, and I had Matt Sherman, who, with Matt, if you just email him every Monday, it gets done. And it was simple, the water tester
Did you
did
do it,
too,
like, at what time did you do it?
2 years ago,
So that was, we still have a lot of applications coming in.
right,
It's been a lull.
it has been a
But I
while.
mean, when you look at the
List, essentially, in some respects, everything will be, we would be outreaching to,
Oh, for every item on here?
those entities,
Yeah,
like,
Yeah.
whether it be the pump out boat or,
right,
or any of the places that want to recharge effluent to different spots.
yep,
We have to sort of like, give them, hey, like we're over here, that's what we can do.
right, right,
And that's sometimes, like behind the scenes and
yeah,
saying, hey, like this might be a good project for you to bring to us.
yeah, yeah.
But I think to have them on the horizon, if that fits the bill,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, to
I mean, it doesn't mean that we're going to craft the project and get all the particulars together.
No, it does not. It means that if something comes to you, or if you do outreach, either way, you would, because that's CPF. Stuff comes to them, but they also reach out
Yes.
on stuff
We're always
too.
chasing.
So I think it's the
It's a lot of
same
face-to-face.
dynamic here, yeah, however it would come to you. You'd be.
Well, maybe through the associations, the various
Yeah,
associations. That's what I said last meeting.
Yeah, that's right. So again, these are projects, not how-tos. It's
Right.
actually a little like the comp plan. These are the.
What you want to see
This is the
happen.
vision, and somebody else has to figure out how to get there, or though it can come from you.
Number 4, the Deering,
Harbor Bridge Street.
yeah.
There's not, I think what goes on down there is probably not healthy for the harbor.
I'm sure it's not.
Whatever goes down.
Before you were on CPF, we used to talk about this at the CPF a lot, like, why isn't something happening here?
I know. Now, there's some change of ownership, there's things going on down there, and there are discussions with the town engineer and interested parties. So hopefully something will come before this body that says, here, this is a solution for what's going on down there. And we would like this much in money, but it's got to be listed. So that's why I put it there. I have no idea what the improvement could be. It could be anywhere from tapping into the Heights sewage plant, which has, X, Y, and Z has to happen before you even have a discussion. But, or some sort of group septic, I don't even know. I mean, we don't know.
There's,
But the question lies, where would they put it?
Well,
That's the problem.
there is a piece of property up the hill, right?
Right.
You mean the big vacant meadow?
No,
No,
the woods.
up beyond Pecosi's or something.
Right, the woods, next to Liz, like next to Liz.
that is CPF property, I think.
Is
Is it?
No, it's
Oh,
not.
It's not, it's available?
No, come up
think we
from
talked about
Pocosi,
the-
where.
why don't we
Liz Hand-
use
like
that
behind
spot?
Liz Hand-
Right, we talked about it. So I mean, maybe it's a collaboration, but I think
what we should do between now and beginning of March is just noodle about it. What other potential things
Could go on
Doesn't
this
hurt to
list.
put them on here.
Correct.
That's
You
what
put
I'm
everything
saying.
on there that you could think of.
Yeah,
Would it be possible would bulkheading and beach erosion fall
I
on
don't
this?
think so.
That's a thing we're facing at Silver Beach. I'm just trying to think of what other things
Yeah.
we've seen.
Would that, I don't know, read that's why I
Right. I mean,
included,
it's-
that's why I included,
My initial take is that
right?
it doesn't meet the requirement
Right.
of the legislation that we're,
right,
but
what do I have?
unless it dealt with like vegetation on the beach
Yeah,
or wildlife influence or something like that.
right.
Usually bulkheading is counterproductive to
Well, yeah.
wildlife.
I will also, I realize what's here. What's here is the original resolution for WQI, town resolution before even the referendum. This, the original, like, this is why we want you to vote, why the town board thinks that the referendum is a good idea. Which I thought was really good just for, what were they thinking?
Right.
That sort of fill in the blank thing, but let me also email you out the most recent revision of 64E, which is the enabling legislation for CPF, which it's available to anybody who's listening here who might want to get it themselves, but I'll email you because I have it on my computer. Just so you have that because it does expand, like, so for instance, in Quogue, they use WQI money for a new water system. Now, we've had this discussion ad nauseum on Shelter Island when it comes to West Neck Water. Why can't we use WQI funds? Because it's a certain type of toxicity. I think it's PFAS.
Right, the toxicity point.
Mattered, right?
They couldn't prove at this point at least, right?
What's that?
That they couldn't prove that.
Here, no.
There.
Salinity is not toxicity.
It's salinity, and neither is nitrates.
Right.
But not to say that someday the center, especially, I'm hearing all kinds of, everybody's hearing, right, the nitrate level is going to get dropped as to what's safe. So we're already borderline. So if the what's safe level drops, maybe then we go to Fred Thiel and see if we can't get so we need water in the center. I mean, public water in the center. So that's why I'll send you the updated legislation, just so you see what's been done and what the possibilities might be.
So put your imaginations to work
Yeah.
about
Okay.
what could go on there.
We want to be out of here. 15, done.
I think we're pretty close. Well, thank you for a second meeting in the month.
Yeah.
I'm glad you came all the way back from Argentina.
Just for this.
What we should do is email us all the itinerary and the vineyard,
Where the cheap
where that vineyard is.
is. Would someone,
We have to go, please.
a hand up? Stephen,
Hi, yeah,
Jacob?
I just had a question about Appendix F. Point 1 talks about IA systems, but the last sentence says the wastewater treatment plan for the municipal buildings will equal 100 IA systems. Is that intended to communicate that the desire is to use WQI funds not just for IA systems, but for the wastewater treatment plant?
There's, I think the intent is just to put, anything that could possibly be related to water quality on this potential plan, so that, it could be, acted on in the future if the enabling legislation says that we need it in there.
Yeah, and
Be able to act on it.
Exactly, and the enabling legislation says, yes, you can do wastewater treatment plants. My view is, I don't know that if it's going to be this plant or this plant gets done, and then there'll be a thought that another plant is needed to service some other
Or maybe
area.
there's something that happens if a plant does get built with what happens to the effluent.
Yeah.
What's your fertilization?
Fertigation.
Is that an actual word? Or
I don't know, I didn't make it up.
I've heard it used. I don't know if it's an actual word, but I've heard it used.
So just to, for a possibility, Steve.
Right or not.
Irregardless, it's not a word.
No.
That's why I use it. Does that answer your question?
Wordsmithing does. This is a very rough draft, and it's stamped draft. It is draft. So we will be working on it to make it better, but I just threw in the kitchen sink.
I guess I would just suggest that you're very specific about other items. You're breaking out, for example, during Harbor Bridge Street. And if in fact, IA systems and the wastewater treatment plant are separate items you're asking for, I would suggest, for the sake of clarity, they be separately identified.
I think that makes sense.
All right.
I would also be curious, maybe at the next meeting, if you could elaborate on how, because I don't pretend to be an expert in any of this, but how the proposal would be the equivalent of 100 IA systems.
We are not saying that.
That's Joe Fenora has said that.
Or Lombard.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just somebody else has said that. And if it would be them coming, if they did ever come to this board for funding, they would have to have documentation and scientific backup
For that claim.
everything.
Yeah.
You know, this is just putting it so that it could potentially come to this board as a subject. You know, that doesn't mean that we are in favor of it or that it ever will come to this board.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good one.
Any other comments? Betty, anything? Tui, you're on.
I'm good.
Well,
Oh, make a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
here you go. So moved. Thank you all.